So, DC has had quite the year, huh? I don't mean that in a good way. To be fair, superhero movies as a whole haven't had such a good year, but also the whole Warner Discovery merger and the David Zaslav stuff and changing HBO Max to Max, it's been rough going. DC had 4 movies released in theaters this year, and none of them were well received. And their direct-to-video animated movies have been a mixed bag. So, let's talk about them, break down what DC was trying to do, analyze where they might have fallen short, and look ahead to their plans for next year. But knowing them, they'll fumble the bag again like they always do, never do anything right, the stupid idiots that got charged with their story. Stupid DC, making bad movies all year. Stupid YouTube channel making me watch them all. Stupid me for wanting them to be better. I can't even go to theaters in here. So to watch Aquaman 2, I had to
purchase it legally from a reputable source.
What message? So did DC release any good movies this year? You could say that. They had some movies that were decent, competent, but mostly they were just bad. Let's start with live action. All 4 of their big blockbusters were part of the DCEU. No big solo projects like The Batman this time. But that put all these movies in a really weird spot because, well, the DCEU is ending. They hired James Gunn to reboot the whole thing, and he's starting 2025 with a clean slate. There wasn't much of a point in keeping up with all these movies if we knew they wouldn't have any consequences going forward. So they had to rely purely on the concepts and goodwill people had towards the previous movies. And if people liked the previous movies, well, then they wouldn't be rebooting them, would they? DC kicked things off with Shazam: Fury of the Gods in February. The first Shazam was one of the most well-liked movies in the DCEU. This is an okay sequel. I like that they went all in with the whole Shazam family, but I don't think they used that idea to its fullest potential. And it just wasn't as funny or fresh as the first movie. After that, we got Flash. And man, what can I even say about Flash? I'll start with the fact that it's another one of those movies. You know, the one where a big movie studio goes,
"Behold, my stuff."
It was painfully obvious that cameos and setting up the new universe were this movie's main purpose, and characters and story were secondary. Flash is the only character who has any development or personality. And even he's hard to get invested in because of all the Ezra Miller drama. I can see some good ideas in here, but this movie comes with so much baggage that it's hard to even view it as a movie.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts.
After that, we got Blue Beetle, the only movie this year that wasn't a sequel of some kind. This one was in an especially weird spot. Blue Beetle isn't that well known of a character, and it was supposed to go straight to streaming. So even though it did flop, at least it had an excuse. I liked it well enough, it just wasn't super unique. It was another superhero origin story. Maybe I would have loved it back in 2007, but it does nothing to stand out in 2023. Then right at the end of the year, there was Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom. This was the last movie of the current DCEU. Given that the universe was about to be rebooted, and we're never going to see these characters again, alongside the fact that this was an Aquaman sequel, expectations could not get any lower. That said, it wasn't half bad. Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson saved it from being a complete disaster. Both of them were having a ton of fun, and Jason Momoa had really settled into a groove playing Arthur. The plot, though, was barely comprehensible comic book movie nonsense. And even if it was good, all those external factors led a lot of people to skip this one. The DCEU went out with a whimper rather than a bang. Next, let's look at all the direct-to-video animated movies. Did they fare any better? I mean, yeah, but that's a low bar. These animated movies were always made for a more niche audience, so you can expect to see them take bigger risks and do weirder stuff, which is always cool to see, even if it doesn't turn out great. Back in the 2010s, you can expect almost every animated movie to be part of the same shared universe, the DCAMU. But after that ended and the new DC Rebirth universe started in 2020, DC has branched out a little more. There is this shared universe that connects some movies, but most of what they make these days are standalone. This year we got 2 new movies in the DC Rebirth universe. The first is Legion of Superheroes. If you don't know, the Legion of Superheroes is basically the Justice League of the future, and stories with them tend to involve a lot of time traveling back and forth. In this movie, Supergirl heads to the future to join the Legion. While I watched, I found myself very confused as to who this movie was for. A lot of it was super corny and campy, with a really obvious and predictable story that would be right at home in a kid's cartoon. But then it still took itself pretty seriously, with PG-13 violence, And it's a part of this movie universe that's pretty clearly targeting adults. It was fine, but I wasn't super impressed. The other Rebirth movie this year was Justice League Warworld. This movie was not what I expected, to put it mildly. The title sets you up for, a Warworld story. Warworld is a classic concept that's been adapted to a few shows over the years. But instead, I'm going to try not to spoil too much, this is more of a series of vignettes with Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. I like those vignettes, don't get me wrong. But then afterwards came the end where you finally get to see Warworld proper, and it sucked. The whole ending was stupid and made no sense. Man, this universe can't seem to get a solid win, can it? Besides Long Halloween, reception has been rough for every single one of them. Now we get into the solo films. First up is Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham. Man, I was excited for this one. It's an Elseworld story where a Batman in the 1920s has to fight Lovecraftian horror. Finally, I can comfortably say that a DC movie this year was good. There were so many cool concepts that could only appear in this movie, and since it was a one-off story in an alternate reality, it wasn't afraid to get really weird with it. There were some bold takes on familiar characters that I wasn't expecting at all. This was easily my favorite DC movie to come out this year. DC had a crossover movie with the show RWBY. 2 movies, actually. Justice League and RWBY, Superheroes and Huntsmen, Parts 1 and 2. In Part 1, the DC characters travel to the world of RWBY, and in Part 2, the RWBY characters go to the world of DC. I've never seen RWBY, and that definitely affected my enjoyment, since I wasn't invested in half the characters and didn't always know what they were talking about. But from what I gather, RWBY is a show that's more about really high-quality action animation than deep storytelling, which is more or less what we got here. Lots of flashy fight scenes with a pretty bare-bones plot. That's not what I want out of a movie, but I'm sure there are RWBY fans out there who loved it. DC crossover with Scooby-Doo for like the 15th time with Scooby-Doo and Krypto 2. It's Scooby-Doo and Krypto the Superdog. Maybe more interesting than the movie is the story behind the movie. Earlier in the year, it was quietly cancelled by Warner Brothers despite being almost finished. Or maybe it was never cancelled, sources are unclear. But somebody leaked the entire movie online, and a lot of people thought this was someone who worked on it getting revenge of some kind on Warner Brothers. Unsubstantiated rumors aside, it did end up releasing. It's about what you would expect. If you've seen Scooby-Doo and Batman the Brave and the Bold, it's a lot like that. I thought it was fun. And the joke about Lois Lane not recognizing Velma without her glasses really got me. And the last animated movie this year was Merry Little Batman. This was supposed to come out a while ago, but it kept getting delayed and cancelled and uncancelled. It actually came out on Amazon Prime instead of Max, because it was one of the projects Zaslav and Warner Discovery sold off rather than finish themselves, like they're doing for that show Batman Caped Crusader. Merry Little Batman is a Christmas movie about Damian Wayne doing a Home Alone and fighting bad guys on Christmas as a little kid. This is pretty unique as far as takes on Batman go. It's way more lighthearted and targeted toward young kids than usual. And just generally, the tone and sense of humor is pretty out there. But it was pretty good. I was glad to see it take a creative risk, and I'm glad it came out at all. And that's it. This brings the total number of movies based on DC properties to 152. Like I said, not much that wowed me this year. Just about everything ranged from mediocre to terrible. But now let's look to the future, because a lot of DC's recent failures were, to an extent, expected, and almost deliberate. DC had been floundering for so many years that they finally decided to take the L and start from scratch again. So they pushed through all these projects that were mostly done, so they could start fresh later. Basically, if they were a sports team, 2023 was their rebuilding year, getting all the players they needed into position so they could succeed later. Now, James Gunn is heading up the rebooted live-action DC universe, and I'm so excited. Not just because James Gunn is super talented, with an amazing track record with superhero movies, but because based on the announcements he's made, he seems to get it. He knows how to bring DC into the mainstream. I've talked about this before, but DC's strategy with adaptations for years has been more or less to make a cinematic universe, and then populate that universe with whatever movies and shows they feel like making at the moment. This resulted in lots of loosely connected projects that don't always bother to properly build out the world. Instead, they would rely on asking their audience to bring with them any pre-existing knowledge of these characters from other media, and just roll with anything they weren't familiar with. They'd say to you, we don't need to do a solo movie for every character. You've seen most of these guys in cartoons from when you were a kid. You get their deal. And if there's anyone or anything you haven't heard of, you'll figure it out. That worked pretty well with animated projects, because those were marketed to hardcore fans and children. But when it came to big live-action movies, the average Joe wasn't willing to do that. The DCEU tried to do a Batman-Superman crossover in the second movie, and most people bounced off of it. Looking at James Gunn's planned movies, you'd think he was about to repeat the same mistakes. You have Superman Legacy, which based on the name doesn't sound like an origin story. The Authority, a super team nobody has heard of. a Batman and Damian Wayne movie, Supergirl, and Swamp Thing. Now, though, the cinematic landscape has changed. People know how to vibe with the comic book movie universe after over a decade of the MCU and DCEU. I think the average moviegoer will be a lot more willing to invest in a sprawling DC universe full of random and unexpected movies, as long as they are A, good, B, not trying to do too much all at once, and C, organized by a single creative vision that ensures they feel connected. Someone like James Gunn. We won't be seeing any of that in 2024, though. Superman Legacy is set to come out in summer 2025, and none of the others have set release dates. DC is taking a bit of a break from live-action movies to get all this stuff ready. The only live-action movie we're getting this year is the sequel to Joker in October. On the animated side of things, DC is releasing a 3-part Crisis on Infinite Earths movie. Like the live-action DCEU, reception to the DC Rebirth universe has been underwhelming. This looks to be another big reboot, but also it's probably going to tie together every animated DC project that came before. In the comics, Crisis on Infinite Earths was the big reset that reorganized decades of stories, and the Rebirth movies have been constantly tied back to the DC AMU. Whatever happens in these movies, expect whatever comes after to be radically different and brand new. Besides that, there are a few standalone animated movies in the works. It's harder to pinpoint when these will come out because DC constantly shifts them around, but it looks like in 2024, we'll be getting a Batman movie set in ancient Aztec times that's been kicking around for a while, and a Watchmen adaptation that looks to be more comic book accurate than the live action movie was. So, we'll see if Warner Brothers can right the ship. Please be good. Good fiction is literally the only thing in my life right now. I'm barely keeping it together over here. I hope you put this out in January because I have no idea when I am. Wait, the Seaball